Today, I'm going to be talking about an opinion article in the left-wing newspaper Haaretz. It was written by Shai Agmon. Shai Agmon is the rank manager, junior research fellow at the New College, Department of Politics and International Relations at the University of Oxford. And a little bit about his background before I read the article, which is going to make it clear who's writing this. Is somebody with a very sound mind. Um, he is exploring, well, in his bio, he describes himself as, in his research, he explores the justifications of real life institutional designs and their relationship with central issues in political philosophy, such as democracy, equality, and freedom. In his research, his interests are democratic theory, philosophy of competition, and right-wing populism. Now, why am I pointing this article out? Because the article itself is going to talk about an issue that I talk about here in the United States. Now, the only other people I know that talk about the coexistence, as it's said, of geopolitics and foreign policy between the Democratic and Republican parties are the Libertarian Institute. They are the primary source regarding news inside this country. I can't get enough of talking about them. Scott Horton, Patrick McFarlane, Anna Anzalone, Kyle Anzalone, and Connor Freeman, Will Porter, and Keith Knight. I could go on. This article here is going to illuminate for you clearly that there is no such thing as a progressive left bloc in Israel or far-right extremists like Religious Zionist Party. And the opinion piece is called "This Settler Conference Left No Room for Doubt. The liberal bloc must replace its leaders." In the same fashion as, can you tell any difference between, say, the former president, Joe Biden, or the current president, Donald Trump? In regards to, like how I always say, in domestic issues, massive differences. Why? Because it divides the people. Not everything is on purpose, but it's just very coincidental that the Democratic Party, the party of values, the party of progressive values, and the Republicans under Trump, the traditional conservative values, right? Neither of these values are ever seen in their merits and displays. But when you look at their policies overseas, they coexist. Israel is the one common bond. The Department of Defense is another common bond. The strengthening of the private military industrial complex, a common bond. And in terms of spending, there might be some discrepancy, but they all agree that there has to be some level of spending. But for who and for what, right? This piece is fantastic, and Shai Agmon deserves a lot of credit for showing you what there really is. There is no difference when it comes to the issue of Gaza, right? At a conference on the West Bank settlements hosted by a right-wing newspaper, Makor Rashon, which is aligned with the Religious Zionist Party, which is a very far-right extremist ideology. It's just basically, a group of psychopaths, religious psychopaths. Anyway, in the settlement of Ofra on May 6th, that's just 6 days ago, two of Israel's key political leaders presented their views on the settlements, the Gaza Strip, and Israel's security doctrine. Okay, one of them said that settlement is Israel's defensive shield. That Ofra in particular is a model and exemplar of pioneering. We're saying, I am here, of leading, of repairing the world in the Israeli, Jewish, and Zionist sense. He also called for direct action, saying we expect all the relevant parties to pitch in with full force to advance the security and welfare of the settlement enterprise. Now, for the last 30 years, 40 years, you had major league heavyweights in the Likud party and the Labor Party, okay? The two leading oppositions in the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament. Right now, the leading parliament, the leading party is the Knesset. The opposition party is the majority of the opposition that's not in government, which is currently the oh goodness, I'm losing my voice here. The leader of the opposition, led by Yair Lapid. And Yair Lapid is a lot different than, say, Benjamin Netanyahu. There's huge differences. Anyway, he called for direct action, saying we expect all the relevant parties to pitch in, right? The second was quick to join the party. We have to maintain security control and freedom of action in Gaza and Judea, Samaria, the biblical term for the West Bank, in southern Lebanon and along the border with Syria. Now, we all know about the expansion of this country, which is outlined in the Greater Israel Project plan. That's not what this is about. It's about the current theme right now. What this means is clear, and anyone who talks about a Palestinian state or withdrawal is simply disconnected from the reality of Israeli security. That's a whitewash. No, Israel's security is secure. And always have been. They could destroy Hamas. They could destroy the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. These groups are easy to destroy, especially when you have them in an enclosed prison. You control the electricity. You control the water. You control the intelligence. You control everything. And you can't wipe out Hamas. You can't wipe out the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. There's a reason for this. Because as long as these groups exist, and as long as you have an Israeli lobby that spreads the tired motto of Israel has a right to defend itself against terrorist groups. Without these groups, you can't inflict the damage that you've been inflicting on Gaza after October 7th and before. Ostensibly, there's no news here. It was a right-wing conference in the heart of the settlement of Ofra, hosted by an ideological right-wing newspaper, so their messages were predictable. Now, here's the real hammer. But the speakers weren't settled activist Daniela Weiss, who is the woman that's prominently spoken about Louis Thero's latest documentary called The Settlers, or the far-right minister Bezalel Smotrich from the Religious Zionist Party. They were the Israeli president Isaac Herzog and the National Unity Party chairman Benny Gantz, who actually are opposed to Netanyahu and are for his prosecution in the criminal. Remember, Netanyahu is facing criminal trial, 3 charges. And as long as he's president, he's not facing any. He's not. As long as he's prime minister, not president. As long as he's prime minister, he's not facing anything. Here's the reason why he wants to stay in power. 2 men who not long ago were considered leaders of Israel's center-left bloc. Instead of standing alongside their voters in the streets calling for the release of the hostages or fighting in the Knesset for what remains of Israel's democracy, Herzog and Gantz were in the West Bank applauding the settlement enterprise. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. The left-center bloc, the leaders of the opposition party, center-left, agreeing with the far-right Likud party, with leaders of the Oded Yehud party, or the Religious Zionism party, or the Shahs, the far-right ministers, or the far-right adjuncts of the late Rabbi Meir Kahane and the Jewish Defense League. Terrorists. That's what they call Kahanists. Wahhabis, like in Saudi Arabia, right? Or the Takfiri Egyptians, or the Munafiqs in Pakistan. These are, terrorists. Make no mistake. Settlers, Kahanists, they're terrorists. There's no difference between them and, say, the Islamic State in Levant. None. Ideologically, none. And all this at a time when the government is once again sending emergency call-up orders to thousands of reservists to fight in a war whose goal is to occupy, settlement, and mass expulsion of Palestinians and to fulfill the Messianic rights dreams. Now, this is something that a lot of people aren't talking about. the Messianic right. Now, these are the people who are involved with the religious Zionism party. People like Ben Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, and Daniela Weiss, and Osset Struk. These are not secularists by any means. They believe that God gave them Israel. In fact, God told them to get more at any cost. It is clear that the result of the forthcoming Gaza operation will be murder of the hostages. It will mine Israel in the Gaza quagmire for generations, signaling the country's final exit from the community of democratic states. And yet Herzog and Gantz were an offer. This is remarkable that the president of Israel, who has called for democracy in Israel, called for the prosecution of Netanyahu, ran against him, is agreeing to the settlement idea in Lebanon and in southern Gaza. Together with the leaders of the judicial overhaul, they were standing alongside the right-wingers. This is the most right-wing government in Israel's history. And you would think the members of the Labor Party would be fully at war with these people. No, not in this issue, because the security is at stake. Progressive values be gone, right? We're talking about expansionism. And one thing about the right, they know how to use violence to achieve a political goal, which is the definition of terrorism. Most terrorist groups are right-wing. Not to say that there aren't left-wing socialist terrorist groups. We saw that with the PLO. We saw that in El Salvador in the 80s. But we saw an uprising of the right to subjugate the socialists in Central America in the 70s and 80s. And of course, in the Arabian Peninsula, and as well as Southeast Asia during the 80s and 90s. The Wahhabis didn't come out of nowhere. They were given a vacuum. And yet Herzog and Gantz were an offer together with the leaders of the judicial overhaul, standing alongside the right-wingers who are pushing Israel to the brink of the abyss. And they didn't just show up. They expressed full fucking support. And this is unprecedented in Israel, where leaders of the opposition party are standing alongside the opposition. Especially with, Benny Gantz. There's nothing new in the dynamic. And listen, for those who say, well, Gantz is a criminal. Their politics, is noteworthy in Israel, but yeah, their geopolitics fucking suck. When it comes to Gaza, at least they believe in a two-state solution. Netanyahu and them, fuck that. You want Smotrich and Ben Gvir and Daniela Weiss and Osset Struk? These people don't believe in a two-state solution. They don't believe in any solution at all. They want to fucking kill everybody. Say what you want about Trump. He's not a religious psychopath. He's guilty of war crimes now. But I'm not worried about him. It's the people under him. We're going to talk about this in a minute. It's going to be a pretty decently long video because there's a lot to cover. He's going to meet with leaders. He's going in the. He's talking about peace with Iran. What does that say with Israel? Is Israel taking a back seat? And this is going to give rise to conspiracy theories about something happening to Trump to get him out the way. Look, I said Trump ain't making his 4 years, man. Because the people under him, the people at the Heritage Foundation, the American Enterprise Institute, these are people that believe that God has granted them the right and to allow for Israel to do whatever it means necessary to defeat Moloch or the Muslims in general. The Crusader versus the Islamic armies of the fucking 4th century. Here we go. That's what these people want. They believe that. You know what makes them dangerous? Is that they believe in self-martyrdom. People believe in the fucking end of the world, literally. Trump is no Christian. He doesn't believe in any of that shit. He'll tell you everything he wants to hear. And most Trump supporters, those who are religiously inclined, but they're not even pious, these people. They just use religion as a shield. they'll fucking die before they allow for Biden and anybody on the left to be president again. I mean, we're this close to civil war. Several former Labor Party leaders, as well as Gantz and Yesh Atid chairman Yair Lapid, were told by their strategic advisor that it is best to keep silent on matters of security because they differ. Like I said, domestic issues, they differ. However, they were told that the right has a monopoly on security issues and that the public leans right. So at best, they were instructed to keep silent so they won't be called leftists, or worse, to veer right and embrace soft right positions. Like I said, there is no such thing as left and right, only when it comes to domestic issues, because it keeps the people divided. It works, not just here in the States, we're the most polarized country, but it works even in Israel. Ask everybody, ask the majority of people in Israel what they think about the Gaza issue, and secularists, center left, progressives, alt-right, far right, Kahanists will agree at some level that Israel has to be at the center of control of the country's government, and that the Palestinians should have no say whatsoever. We'll have, a couple of spots open for you, but we run the show. After more than a decade of experience, the results of this process are clear, utter failure, both politically and diplomatically. The votes from the right never came. Political competition evaporated, and Israeli politics moved further and further to the right. Because when it comes to cultural issues, men, and especially very dominant women, very submissive women, not dominant, but submissive women will lean right. Progressive men, thinkers, teachers, educators, adjunct socialists, center left, atheists, secularists will lean left. Dominant women, women of the working class will lean left. Majority of them, anyway. Nevertheless, Gantz and Herzog's appearance in offer represent a new stage, which is even worse and more worrying. There was no longer fawning for political purposes, but rather wholehearted endorsement, and not with the soft, the liberal right, but with the most salient positions on the hard right. This is dangerous. And look, I've done countless videos, and I'm not going to repeat this shit here. Okay, go look at my latest news playlist, right? The new one and the old one, right? And what you'll see is basically the difference between left and right when it comes to domestic cultural issues, no matter what country it is. But like I said, I use the United States because I live in the country, but it's also the most polarized country on the face of the earth, bar none. The most propagandized country on the face of the earth, and it has to be. Because we're not to know what's going on in our name. We're to believe whatever we want. We're at least, and also we have to look at each other like we're the enemy. We're the cause of border security and the lack thereof. We're the cause of financial disparity. We're the cause of cultural indifferences, which is heated. One of them demanded security control of Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. Here we go. The other praised Ofra, the incubator of the leaders of the Jewish underground of the 1980s and the elite of the Gush Imam settlement and movement, as the embodiment of Zionism and Tikkun Olam, the Jewish obligation to repair the world. How fucking arrogant is that? It's a Jewish obligation to repair the world. To repair the world of what? Muslims? Those who are progressive? Both said openly and publicly that they are on the other side. The side of those who dreamt up and crafted the judicial overhaul, current government, who oppose bringing the hostages home and ending the war, which is written in the Hannibal Directive, which is a Likud party narrative, who oppose a state commission of inquiry and are willing to sacrifice Israel's security on the altar of their settlements. In other words, we're going to basically cleanse Gaza, get into the West Bank and cleanse of them, of the Palestinian Authority. And we're basically going to build settlements. Sure, we won't kick out all the Palestinians, but a majority of them will go to Egypt and Lebanon and maybe even Syria. But one thing is clear: Israel will expand by force, if need be. If Herzog and Gantz have indeed become enthusiastic supporters of Smotrich, they should have the decency to leave their parties and join his. And that's the danger I'm talking about. The liquidation of other parties, a coexistence, one government. It's exactly what the United States wants. The people under Trump, using Project 2025, which is the foundation of the Heritage Foundation, want to get rid of the old establishment, the old guard, to get rid of the intelligence services, to get rid of the Department of Defense, to get rid of the executive, judicial, and legislative branches of government, to create a single, unified center of power. The fifth bloc, the media, well, they could continue to keep going because we're going to liquidate those too and create our own media. Orwellian? Is it a far-fetched idea? Years ago, I would tell you, yeah. Now, you listen to people like John Hagee, Kenneth Copeland, hear what the fuck these people have to believe. I mean, so much so, and I love using this point to get it straight through your fucking heads. Dick Cheney sided with Kamala Harris against Trump. It's not because of Trump, because he saw what the fuck was coming. Dick Cheney, who belongs, in the third circle of hell with the retard Kamala Harris, leader of the Progressive Party. You couldn't have any two more diametrically opposed mindsets in the political spectrum. What does that fucking tell you? Everything about what could be coming. Because what's happening in Israel is a microcosm of here. What's happening in Afghanistan? Listen, folks, not to pick on the right here. There is no, listen, I'm not picking on traditional conservative values. I'm not picking on traditional liberal values. They're gone. Those ideas are gone, long gone. It's only you people of the left that actually think you're for liberalism. No, you're not. You're for this twisted leftist ideology, which is, a monstrosity. Well, same thing for Trump supporters. Conservative values? Fuck no. God's sakes. Imagine thinking that Donald Trump believes in God, or that Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene or any of those idiots do. Oh, goodness gracious. I mean, it's a worry. It's a concern. Herzog and Gantz didn't suddenly become adherents of Israeli control of the entire land of Israel. They were bluffing, integrating themselves, not because they changed their minds, but out of weakness. Doesn't that what the Democratic Party is? Right. That's how Trump won the second time. Trump had no business of winning. And he won emphatically because the Democrats gave up. When I saw the first debate between Biden and Trump, by the way, that was no debate. It was an old senile man basically having a self-argument against himself while Donald Trump was basically lying to his fucking teeth. And I swear to God, it was one of the most macabre scenes I ever saw in politics. And this is coming at a time when I saw Sarah Palin, I said, there's no fucking way we get worse than this. We are beyond that pale. And now it's not funny anymore because Idiocracy, the film, is no longer a film. It's a fucking documentary. And look, like I said before, the rise of right-wing populism, whether it's nationalism or ultra-orthodoxy, We're seeing it in Afghanistan. We're seeing it in Ukraine. We're seeing it in Russia. We're seeing it in the United States and Israel, and Argentina, and in really fast fucking time. In Syria, for God's sake, Syria's president is the current leader, and it's not the former. He still is the leader of Al Qaeda in Syria. And we have a French president hosting this motherfucker. You Biden supporters supported the overthrow of Assad. You call yourself progressive? You are the Yair Lapid party. You are the Labor Party. You are Herzog and Gantz in Israel. You're weak. And you allow for this really salient, transparent right wing fucking nut jobs to become powerful. How the fuck did you, and you're the thinkers, you're the teachers, you're the educators, and you allow for this to happen? Either you wanted this to happen because overall you secretly agree with them, or you are this useless. This isn't leadership. It's anti-leadership. Damn fucking right. This article is a home run. And it's particularly grotesque because nobody buys it. Isn't it fascinating, ladies and gentlemen, that an Israeli newspaper could talk this way? Meanwhile, the New York Post, the Los Angeles Times, Chicago Tribune, St. Petersburg, fucking St. Petersburg in Florida. Do you think they have the guts to do anything like this? Fuck no. Consequently, it won't even work. But even if it is ridiculous, the bottom line is clear. As long as the leadership of what is called the liberal bloc is in practice standing alongside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is wanted for war crimes, and I advocate for anybody out there to forcibly detain him and have him deported to the fucking Hague so he can face his crimes. And far-right ministers and MKs like Smotrich, Simcha Rothman, Yariv Levine, people of the Religious Zionist Party, and Itamar Ben-Gvir, Dracula, who I fucking call, who at least here in New York give props to the city. You know, they're liberals. We fucking booed the fuck out of that motherfucker. I mean, even the liberal Jews, the focus, thumbs up. This bloc has no hope. That's right. Just become the undisputed heavyweight, political party. When the people who are supposed to represent it are instead serving the other side, then the protests in the streets, no matter how persistent and determined they are, won't be enough. It's what we should have here. Moreover, why should center-left voters go to the polls and vote for Gantz and his ilk if they are offering exactly the same wares as the far right does, in defiance of their voters and voters' views? If they aren't offering an alternative platform, what's the point of their political existence? There was more to this article. There's a little bit more, but I covered the majority of it. And shout out to Shai Agmon, a fucking heavyweight of an article. Okay? Great article. Thank goodness he wrote that, because that's exactly what we're seeing. Not just in Israel, but here in the States. Now, just to add a little bit more, something we have to keep an eye on. Disagreements on Iran. Gaza strained Trump-Netanyahu relationship. Just like that. Iran. The war that Israel is fucking whoring itself out for the last 40 years. Now, the Department of Defense and even some within Trump's cabinet are in opposition to this war. And they have been even under the Obama administration. Under the Obama administration, one of the few good things about Barack Obama was that he wrote in his memoirs that he did not want to be responsible for Iraq 2.0. Because he knew that Iran is not Iraq. The Persians will be a formidable adversary. We already have sanctions on them. Now, those economic sanctions help to destroy the inner workings of the Saddam Hussein Ba'athist Party and its people, its army. It's not the case here. The Persians have fighting blood with that goes back, you know, generations upon millennia, thousands of years. Right? What does this article say? Trump took office in January. He and Prime Minister Netanyahu were closely aligned how to approach the most pressing issues in their relationship, which is the war in Gaza and aggression from Iran. However, Trump lifted a hold the Biden administration had put on sending large bombs to Israel. He encouraged Israeli military operations to finish the job against Hamas. He agreed with Netanyahu on confronting Iran and its proxy groups in the region. Now, I bet you a bottom dollar that J.D. Vance, the vice president, who, by the way, is not taking AIPAC money, one of the few, is whispering in his ear, Israel is becoming more problem than what they were. Because like I told you in previous videos, there is a small group within the Trump administration that is basically growing. And this is another fear of mine, because I think there's two conservative there's two right-wing groups, pro-Trump, pro-Israel, anti-Jews, who hide under the banner of anti-Zionism. These are people who hate Jews. They fucking hate them. Now, both of these groups are morally reprehensible. No matter what Israel government is doing, and they're doing some of the worst war crimes I've ever seen, really right up there with Bosnia Herzegovina, the worst I've ever seen in my life, are making it to a point where anti-Jews are feeling very comfortable about telling you, yeah, maybe Hitler was right. Because no matter what, Hitler was wrong. Because violence is not solving anything. And even as an atheist, I agree with the Christ parable that, violence begets violence. Those who live by the sword will die by it. There's another worry of mine, is that, this is a far stretch, but it's in the back of my mind, like a little, like a reminder that if they were ever getting power, these anti-Jews, because they're going to get, if we go to war with Iran, it's going to really harm the country. And then we're going to feel blowback by terrorist groups out of Syria and Afghanistan because they'll attack us. They'll have no choice but to, right? Because it'll be an all-out war, in Gaza and Iran, and it's a war against the Muslims, right? Because the imams are getting louder and louder, these Salafist jihadi takfiris, okay? Whatever they want to call themselves. All right, they're getting louder. It's only a matter of time before we hit with a false flag type event or a terrorist event. It's going to allow to happen. And then, the crazy conspiracies will happen. But let's get to that. But what's going to happen is this is going to cause an outcry of Israel is becoming a problem. And by Israel, all of Judaism, Jews. They're just going to group everybody together. And, we laugh at Nick Fuentes. And we laugh at, the Fresh and Fit group and, these online personalities, right? But, they're very young men and women. And I mean, really fucking young. Not like the boomers that we see with the conservatives or the boomers of the hippies of the left, right? The youth are going to say, well, wait a minute. Maybe there is a point. Maybe we need to get rid of the fucking problem. And what will happen is, my fear is that this group is going to become the majority in the government. And that a disassociation of Israeli and U.S. government, which is what I want. Not totally, but they want, fuck them all. If that were to happen, the countries that were civilly defeated by the West, with the full approval of Israel, knowing that the United States is not there anymore, will get their pound of flesh, so to speak. And of course, the far stretch I'm talking about is the Samson option, which is an actual foreign policy plan, an Israeli lateral plan where if they're attacked by Iran, maybe members of the Gulf, Lebanon, Syria, even the Muslim countries of Indonesia or the Philippines, right? All come in. Well, Israel can't defend themselves because they don't know how to fight. Not without the United States. No matter what the United States says, tells you, oh, they're a great fighting force. No, they're not. No, they're not. Remember, they lost to Hezbollah in 2006. They're taking this long to defeat Hamas. Unarmed people in Gaza. Anyway, what do you think is going to happen? Well, because they have allegedly the third largest nuclear stockpile in the world. Well, according to the Samson option, if you ever read it, they will ensure that if there is no Israel, if we can't have a country, you can't have a world. And they'll just destroy all the neighboring Arab countries. But there is allegedly, and I think this is true, bombs pointed at the United States because the United States will abandon them. Now, remember, the country of Israel was founded under the precept of never again, talking about the Holocaust, where the Jews of today see the Jews of yesteryear as lessers. They do. Weak. Respected because they're Jews, and people of the book. But weak will never be weak again. And because we got the power of the atom, the power of the sun in the palm of my hand, right? They'll just basically say this gives us power, but it just makes you weaker. Like a bully picking on a 6-year-old, like a 14-year-old bully picking on a 6-year-old. I'm bigger, I'm stronger. No, you're just genetically bigger. But if that 6-year-old has a fucking bat, it almost evens up the score. Israel knows they have the United States and the coalition partners on their side. But without them, oh shit, right? Look, I'm not a guy who talks about fringe conspiracy theories. And this is talking about, Iran here, but it's something that they're trying to basically create hegemony in the region to hold off the war. But what I'm talking about is simple. Without the United States, the countries are going to attack Israel. End of story. They know it, and the world knows it. And that's the reason why Israel lobbies American politics hard. Now, of course, look, man, for those who are saying that I'm anti-Semitic or, anti-Jewish, one look at my channel, dispels the notion. I am a huge critic of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I'm a huge critic of Wahhabi Islam, more so than Israel. Israel is just at the focal point right now. But I talk about Al-Qaeda even now. Still, I talk about 9/11. Years later, I know it's a dying subject. But still, it's important to realize, hey, the case is still going, right? But I talk about the current themes. And I do it so in a way where I'm educating the audience with some knowledge, with the little bit of knowledge I do have, by reading to you primary source material. Oh, you're reading from, the legacy media. There's a thing called read between the lines. This is the reason why I offer, in a lot of my videos, you'll see I offer some additional thoughts. If my reputation is, according to my, 4 or 5 subscribers, right? I have a very small channel, but, they're with me not because I'm very entertaining, which I'm not, because, I think that I report as is, and I'm, proud of the fact. But if that's true, then we have a worrisome future ahead of us because we're going to have to start thinking about, joining together. And what I mean by this, I'm talking about progressives and conservatives. So what's left? Those are the far right and far left. Those are the centrists, right? The atheists, secularists, the Christians. Listen, we all have one thing in common. We're victims. We're victims of what? Of government, of ideology. And we need to basically understand that the only way we're going to get out of this problem is by having a new government, totally. Yeah, you may say to yourself, it's too late. It's too big. No, it's not. It's not. You may think that way because you may think alone that we're not the minority. We're a majority, but we're a very silent majority. Right now, the big mouths belong to the extremist groups to the left and right, just like in Israel. What people don't realize is that when Netanyahu won the prime ministership in December of 2022, people tend to forget. Tens and tens of thousands of people went right to the streets that very night. Not tomorrow, not the next day, that night. Protest. It was one of the biggest protests I've seen in my life because they knew what was coming. We're talking about people of the center left and traditional Zionism. Not all forms of Zionism is bad, but at least with that, because they knew that the two-state solution is gone, that the expansion of Israeli policies are going to come from religious maniacs, the Kahanists, and the Likud party under Netanyahu, who's already proven he's a war criminal and corrupt. We have to change the government. And if this article was of any beneficial to you, thank you, Shai Agmon, for your opinionated piece. It's a mirror of what's coming here. And we have to act now. All right. Hey, listen, guys, thank you very much for putting up with me, reading the article, watching the video, and see you in the next video. Take care, everybody.